In 1921, Americans were terrified of the hamburger. Not the price, not the calories. They were afraid it might kill them. Because back then, ground beef had a reputation, and it was a nightmare. People believed it was made from the scraps, the leftovers, the spoiled meat nobody else would buy, ground up to hide the rot. A few years earlier, a book called The Jungle had ripped the lid off America's meatpacking industry, exposing filth, disease, and horrors most people couldn't unsee. The hamburger was carnival food, gutter food, the kind of thing you ate at your own risk. So here's the impossible question one man set out to answer. How do you take the most distrusted food in America and turn it into something people line up for? The answer didn't just build a company, it invented an entire industry. This is the story of White Castle, the chain that created fast food itself, taught its own future rivals how to win, and then made a choice almost no other company in history would dare to make. It starts with a short-order cook named Walt Anderson. Anderson worked the griddle at food stands around Wichita, Kansas, and somewhere around 1916, he did something that sounds tiny but changed everything. He took a ball of ground beef, smashed it flat onto the hot grill, and seared it fast. Flat meant more surface, more crust, more flavor, and it cooked in seconds. He'd basically just invented the fast hamburger. But Anderson understood the real problem wasn't taste, it was trust. So he did something radical. He cooked out in the open, right in front of the customer, where they could watch every step. Nothing hidden, nothing to fear. And people started coming back. He had the product. What he didn't have was the vision to turn it into an empire. That arrived in 1921 in the form of a man named Billy Ingram. Ingram wasn't a cook. He was an insurance and real estate man, a marketer to his bones. And when he tasted what Anderson was doing, he saw something Anderson couldn't. He saw a brand. With just $700 between them, the two partners opened a single tiny restaurant in Wichita, and every detail of it was a weapon aimed straight at America's fear of the hamburger. Start with the name, White Castle. White for purity, for cleanliness, for spotless. Castle for strength, permanence, something that would never crumble. And they built the building to match, a gleaming little fortress with shining stainless steel inside, scrubbed until it sparkled, with employees in crisp, immaculate uniforms. The message to a nervous public was impossible to miss. This meat is safe. This place is clean. You can trust us. Then came the burger itself, small, square, cooked on a bed of onions, sold for just 5 cents, cheap enough to buy a whole sack of them. They were so easy to eat in 1 or 2 bites that customers were told to buy them by the sack. That little square burger would one day get a nickname the whole country knows, the Slider. And decades later, Time magazine would crown it the most influential burger of all time. But here is the part most people don't realize. White Castle didn't just sell burgers, it invented the playbook for all of fast food. Think about everything that makes a modern fast food chain. Identical buildings in every city, a standardized menu, assembly line cooking, strict cleanliness, uniforms, a consistent experience no matter which location you walk into. White Castle did all of it first in the 1920s and 30s, decades before the world ever heard the name McDonald's. They were so obsessed with control that when they needed identical buildings, they started their own company to manufacture them. They built their own equipment. They even made their own paper hats. They engineered consistency into a science. Every White Castle, anywhere, was supposed to be exactly the same. That idea, that one core idea, is the foundation that the entire trillion-dollar fast food industry is still built on today. The little chain spread out of Wichita and across the Midwest, and it was a sensation. Then, in 1933, Walt Anderson, the cook who started it all, sold his half of the business to Ingram and walked away. The next year, Ingram moved the company's headquarters to Columbus, Ohio, and took total command of the kingdom he'd helped build. And this is where the story takes its most surprising turn, the turn that explains everything about White Castle today. In the decades that followed, a new generation of imitators studied White Castle's playbook and ran with it. McDonald's, Burger King, they took the standardized assembly line model and added one explosive ingredient White Castle refused to touch: franchising. By selling the right to open locations to thousands of outside operators, those chains detonated across the entire planet, tens of thousands of restaurants in every country on Earth. White Castle could have done the same. It could have become the biggest restaurant company in the world, and it said no. The Ingram family made a choice, and they have held that line for 100 years. No franchising, no taking on heavy debt, no selling shares to the public. They would grow only as fast as they could pay for, and they would never, ever give up control. It was a decision that quietly caped how big they could ever become, while the companies that copied them shot past into the stratosphere. Most people would call that the mistake that cost them the throne, but look at what it actually bought them. While countless fast food giants got bought out, broken up, loaded with debt, and flipped between investors, White Castle just kept going. Steady, independent, family-owned, generation after generation. In the 1970s, they made one more brilliant move, sliding their burgers into grocery store freezers so that Americans who lived nowhere near a White Castle could finally get their fix at home. Today, those frozen sliders make up a huge chunk of the business, and the company has now sold well over 6 billion of them. So where does the kingdom stand now? White Castle is still here. Around 345 restaurants across 13 states, with annual sales north of $500 million. It is still, to this day, owned and run by the same family that started it, now led by a great-granddaughter of Billy Ingram, the fourth and fifth generation still steering the ship. It has a fan base so devoted they call themselves cravers, people who will drive across state lines for a sack of sliders. It never became the biggest. It was never supposed to. White Castle invented the entire game, handed the world its rule book, watched its students grow into giants, and then chose a different victory altogether. Not to conquer the world, just to outlast almost everyone in it. 100 years on, the little White Castle is still standing. If you enjoyed this story, smash that like button, subscribe for more business stories like this one, and tell me in the comments, have you ever bought them by the sack? I'll see you in the next one.